The story of Rome begins in blood and myth, with twin brothers Romulus and Remus abandoned, cast away to the mercy of the Tiber, and eventually raised by a protective she-wolf. Their eventual conflict over the site of their city resulted in the tragic fratricide of Remus, establishing a brutal, dark precedent for the future empire to follow throughout its long history. Rome grew by absorbing neighboring tribes and Etruscan sophistication, yet it remained tethered to kings. This era of monarchy culminated in the cruel, unchecked tyranny of the king Tarquin the Proud, whose son's violent assault on the noblewoman Lucretia ignited a sudden firestorm of righteous public fury. Led by the determined Lucius Junius Brutus, the Roman people rose up against the royal house. They expelled their king from the city and swore a solemn oath before the ancient gods, vowing that no man would ever hold absolute unchecked power in their city ever again. This pivotal moment in 509 BC transformed the monarchy into a fragile new Roman republic, setting the stage for a complex political experiment that would eventually dominate the ancient world. The transition to a republic was far from a peaceful evolution. It was a struggle. It was a messy, hard-fought battle for representation that defined the early Roman social order. While the patrician elite initially hoarded power, the disenfranchised plebeians fought for their own rights. They secured their place through the unprecedented act of a mass strike against the elites, forcing the creation of the tribunate and the codification of public laws for all citizens. These institutions were not born from grand design, but from a desperate, recurring human need. They needed to prevent the return of tyranny and manage the constant, grinding internal strife. As Rome solidified its governance, it remained a regional power, ignored by empires of East. Yet, the very mechanisms designed to balance power and protect the citizenry created a machine. It was a resilient, expansionist machine that would soon change the face of the world. By the time Alexander the Great passed into history, Rome had forged a unique identity. This identity would soon propel it beyond the Italian peninsula, turning its internal conflicts into the foundation of a global empire that would endure for centuries across the known world. The Republic was not a gift from the gods, but a product of human friction. Patricians held the reins of the state, guarding their ancestral privileges with a jealous intensity. Plebeians, the backbone of the Roman economy and army, found themselves consistently pushed to margins. When the strike of 494 BC occurred, it sent a shockwave through the Roman establishment. The city stood silent, its fields untended, its gates vulnerable, and its legions suddenly absent. Faced with total collapse, the aristocracy finally conceded to the demands of the common people. The office of the tribune emerged, a shield for the weak against the powerful magistrates. This was a radical departure from the autocratic rule that had defined the previous centuries. Laws were no longer whispered in private chambers, but carved into stone for the public. The Forum became a classroom for citizenship, where the rules of life were finally visible. This transparency was the bedrock upon which the future Roman legal tradition was firmly built. It was a revolutionary concept that law should be consistent, public, and universally applied today. While the rest of the Mediterranean looked toward the legacy of Alexander, Rome looked inward. They were busy perfecting the art of governance, refining their institutions through trial and error. The internal politics of Rome were often violent, yet they fostered a unique civic endurance. Every crisis, every strike, and every political standoff served to strengthen the state's internal resolve. It was a period of intense, improvised growth that prepared the city for greater challenges. The Roman machine was being assembled, piece by piece, in the shadow of the hills. It was not built for conquest, but for survival against the ghosts of its kings. Yet the very structure of this republic made it inherently aggressive toward its external rivals. The consuls, serving only one-year terms, were constantly hungry for glory and military success. This competitive spirit drove the Roman legions further and further into the surrounding Italian lands. They were not merely defending their borders, they were actively expanding their sphere of influence. The Republic was a hungry entity, fueled by the ambition of its elected political leaders. As the centuries passed, the distinction between defense and conquest began to blur entirely away. Lessons learned during the struggle of the orders became the blueprint for Roman expansion. They learned how to integrate conquered peoples, turning enemies into allies and eventually into citizens. This unique method of assimilation allowed Rome to grow far beyond any typical city-state. It was a political alchemy that transformed defeated tribes into the fuel for future wars. The Republic was a paradox, both a beacon of liberty and an engine of domination. Its citizens were proud of their freedom, yet they were relentless in suppressing others' autonomy. The stage was set for a collision between this rising power and the established empires. The Mediterranean world was about to witness the rise of a truly unprecedented political force. The city on the Tiber was finished with its internal strife and ready to expand. The era of the kings was long gone, and the age of the Republic began. The transition to a republic was far from a peaceful evolution. It was a messy, hard-fought struggle. While the patrician elite initially hoarded power, the disenfranchised plebeians secured their rights through a mass strike. This unprecedented act forced the creation of the tribunate and the codification of essential public laws. These institutions were not born from grand design, but from a desperate, recurring need for stability. The people sought to prevent the return of tyranny and manage the constant internal strife daily. As Rome solidified its governance, it remained a regional power, largely ignored by empires of the East. Yet the very mechanisms designed to balance power and protect the citizenry created a resilient machine. This expansionist machine thrived on the friction of its own internal political and social pressures. By the time Alexander the Great passed into history, Rome had forged a unique political identity. This identity would soon propel it beyond the Italian peninsula, turning conflicts into a global empire. The streets of Rome hummed with the tension of a people who had tasted true political agency. Patricians looked down from their marble villas, sensing the shifting tides of the common Roman folk. The plebeians, once silent, now gathered in the forum to demand their share of the power. Voices rose in unison, echoing against the stone walls of the city that had known only kings. Every decree was scrutinized, every law debated with the fervor of those who had fought hard. The tribunes stood as shields, their bodies and voices protecting the vulnerable from the elite's reach. It was a fragile balance, held together by the memory of the oath sworn against the kings. No man would ever again hold the absolute power that had once crushed the spirit of Lucretia. The Republic was a living organism, growing stronger with every challenge that threatened its core foundations. Internal strife was no longer a weakness, but a forge that tempered the iron of Roman law. The Senate chambers buzzed with the sharp rhetoric of men who understood the weight of their choices. Outside, the city expanded, its influence creeping across the hills like a slow, inevitable tide of conquest. Neighboring tribes watched with trepidation as the Roman machine organized itself into a singular, focused entity. The legacy of the she-wolf lived on in the relentless ambition of the new Roman citizens. They were no longer subjects of a crown, but architects of a system that defied all tradition. The world beyond the peninsula seemed vast, yet Rome looked outward with a gaze of hungry curiosity. History was being rewritten in the dust of the Forum, one law and one strike at a time. The Republic was a daring experiment, a gamble against the inevitable decay that claimed other ancient states. It was a testament to the power of a people united by a shared, fierce, and stubborn. The foundations were laid in blood, but the structure was built with the mortar of civic duty. Rome was ready to step out of the shadows of the past and into the light of destiny. The Mediterranean awaited the arrival of the legions, unaware of the transformation that had already occurred. The Republic stood tall, a beacon of order amidst the chaos of the ancient, warring world. Every citizen felt the pulse of the city, a rhythm that beat for the glory of Rome. The struggle for representation had transformed into a drive for dominance, fueled by the collective will. The elite and the commoners, though divided, were bound by the same dream of Roman greatness. It was a paradox of a society that thrived on conflict, while demanding absolute, unwavering internal unity. The laws were carved into bronze, a permanent reminder of the rights won through blood and sweat. No king could ever return to reclaim the throne that had been shattered by the people's resolve. The Republic was the answer to the tyranny of the past, a shield against future dark ages. As the sun set over the 7 hills, the city glowed with the promise of coming centuries. The story of Rome was only beginning, its pages filled with the echoes of 1,000 voices. The expansionist machine was ready, its gears turning with the precision of a well-oiled, lethal force. The world would soon know the name of Rome, not as a kingdom, but as a republic. The legacy of the brothers, the wolf and the oath, remained etched into the very Roman soul. Every stone laid in the city carried the weight of the history that had brought them here. The struggle was the foundation, and the republic was the monument built upon that hard ground. Rome was a city of contradictions, yet it moved forward with a singular, unstoppable, and relentless purpose. The future was a vast, open horizon, beckoning the Roman people to claim their place in time. The Republic was the ultimate expression of a people who refused to be ruled by fear. It was a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to organize and to survive. The streets were filled with the energy of a nation that had found its true, collective voice. The Senate and the people stood together, a formidable force that would soon change the world forever. The echoes of the past were silenced by the clamor of the present, building a new future. Rome was no longer just a city. It was an idea that would span the entire globe. The Republic was the crucible, where the future of the ancient world was being forged today. The journey was long, but the path was clear, and the Roman people marched forward with pride. The destiny of the empire was written in the laws that governed the heart of the city. The Republic stood as a monument to the resilience of those who dared to challenge the kings. Rome was ready to conquer the world, one law, one battle, and one generation at a time.